Could Ryan Crouser break the world record in the shot put with the glide? We're going to start right now. Okay, so recently there's been a little bit of discussion amongst throwers on whether or not Ryan Crouser, if he would have kept gliding, could he have broken the world record with the glide? So, and think about the world record as Randy Barnes' world record, or even to a point, I think if we start thinking about gliders, 2306 was the best throw ever with the glide. That's Ulf Timmerman. Alessandro Andre threw 2291, I believe it was, or 93, something like that, thrown off a cliff in Italy, and he had the second furthest throw with the glide. So I'm trying to think through this process of, whether or not Ryan Crouser could do it. He had a really, really good glide when he was a youth, and we've actually done a technical analysis of that and to see, what parts of the glide was he really good with, and then how did that transfer even to his technique in the spin. Currently, he just broke the world record this year with the spin. So had he never switched, and I think he switched his halfway through his senior year of high school to the spin, and now I believe he's probably got the best actual rotational technique in the history of the world, which is also why he has the best throw in the history of the world. So could he have done that had he never switched? And my first instinct then, after I think about Ulf Timmerman and after I think about Alessandro Andre, is then to figure out that contemporary. And you might think about Majewski and then thinking about David Storrell and what those guys did with the glide. And I think Majewski was like a 2190 glider, a little bit further, maybe 2195. And then Storrell actually, threw 22 meters with the glide. So Crouser in 2018 was clowning around throwing, just to see with the glide how far he could throw. And I know he has some pretty big standing throws, usually over 20 meters plus. I think maybe even a little bit deeper. And so he hadn't glided in quite a while, probably 8 to 10 years since his previous glide, probably 8 years. And he goes in and he takes this throw at the training center. So we're going to check that out right now. Josh Freeman dancing, and we got the boss is on. Okay, so I think before we watch his other throws from high school, I think, one, when you're listening to this song, you're just gonna crank, right? But his technique wasn't amazing. So I think the response from the other guys too, you can also hear like, get the heck out of here with the F word. And my understanding from a pretty decent source is that throw was around 2150, okay? Maybe it's a little deeper than that, maybe it's a little shorter than that, but let's just say that's 2150. Okay, so now let's look at his technique when he was gliding on the regular, and he was younger. He was definitely younger, smaller, skinny. I like that reverse too, where he just hammers it. And this is the throw here where we actually did analysis, and I like his reverse where he hits that right heel and hangs. Man, look how skinny he is, how tall and skinny. Okay, so he's got a good, decent technique, rotates that right knee down, gets into that heel on the finish, comes off of that, and you can actually see in this throw where a lot of his glide comes into play with his boom, where a lot of his technique comes into play even now with how he moves with the rotational technique. So this is this big throw where this is a nice breakdown. Left leg might begin a little bit deep here as he comes to the middle. That right foot sort of like slides over instead of being a little bit more linear. But watch his right knee. You see how that right knee just drops. He starts rotating that right hip, right foot rotates well, opens that left arm, and just hammers this. Stays real grounded. And this is that he's a little bit better with his positions now in the spin. Keep in mind, this is when he was in high school, so he was not as advanced or as mature, and then just gets this huge monster throw. I think this was his junior year, so he must have graduated. So that 2018 throw would be about 7 years after the fact. So the big question, okay, we see the movements. We understand what's going on. apparently the 2018 throw, 2150, okay, with the glide. Let's just play the game that it was 2150. I believe, and these are conversations that I love as a throws coach, is that throwers love having these crazy hypothetical discussions as to what could, in theory, or potentially happen. Bringing up David Storrell, one of the best contemporary glider as far as distance is concerned, has to peak to throw 22 plus. Now, if Crouser had never switched from the glide, and he just continued to develop his technique in the glide, relative to what he's done now, I do believe he would have probably thrown 2250 to 2290, somewhere in there. Probably would have pushed up to 2290 if like everything lined up perfectly. I do think he could have had a 2250, maybe consistent season year by year with the glide. I think my struggle here is that he just broke the world record this year with the spin, and his technique is very, very good. So yes, he would have been more consistent with the glide, and that 2150 probably would have been a regular 22-meter throw had he continued to do that for 7 or 8 years straight. But throwing 2306, beating or tying Timmerman, or throwing over 2306 and beating Timmerman's mark, I struggle because Timmerman had good technique and he was on gas. And I think that Ryan had to make that switch to the rotational technique because of the limitations potentially from a biomechanical perspective with the glide. But I do think he would still be a top 3 or 4 thrower in the world and potentially still win, the Olympics, and potentially still win world championships, because he would be automatic at those big competitions with the glide. He's still now automatic in 2019, 2020, 2021. He's automatic with the rotation. It took, those three years he's been very, very automatic. So I do not believe he would break the world record, but I do believe he could, in theory, potentially have the world leads. I think he would be a little bit better than Storrell. No disrespect to Storrell, but I think Crouser's technique's a little bit better from his high school days. But I don't think he would end up breaking the record. So I apologize. I hope I didn't hurt anybody's feelings. I do think he's the greatest thrower of all time for shot putters. I think his technical model is the best rotational technical model, and I think you could learn a lot if you're a glider by watching what he did at that World Youth Meet, and even some of his aspects of where he threw in high school and his technique with his right knee, the rotating part of his right foot, and how he holds that left leg grounded. So if you need help with your throwing, you want to become a better athlete, you want to become a better shot putter, click on the link down below, head over to throwsuniversity.com, and we can help you dominate your opponents. Until next time, guys, peace.